think I have a presentation here. Here you go. Yeah. Um, Good morning. Good afternoon. Hope everybody's enjoying their lunch. Really happy to be here. We are a. Before I start, I just want to say Mark has been our lawyer here in the Philippines for a couple of years now. Even when I was working at Binance, Mark was advising us and helping us after regulation and basically variety of things. Because I think one thing that we've learned over the last 72 hours is that this industry is not for the faint of heart. And also beyond I think DYOR, do your own research. This other term that we always tell everybody: not your keys, not your crypto. So I think it's been a huge learning experience, especially for me, as I've sort of my career have emerged over the last almost 5 years. So a little bit of a personal story about myself is that I started off my career, I think, in TradeFi. Actually, I started off my career as a banker at Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong, and then one of the first things I did was actually in distressed, which seems to be is going to become back in trend in this industry now. But irregardless of that, I've spent the last prior to those last from 2005 to 2018, basically became like I was like a professional CFO for different startups, mainly in Beijing, and then also in LA as well. When I was basically did the buyout of Grinder. And in 2018, like many of us here, I was intrigued by the rise of Bitcoin, the emergence of Ethereum, the emergence of smart contracts, and the emergence of ICO. And then I just found out that these people that I sort of had come across, CZ and He, were actually launched their own exchange called Binance in the summer of 2017. And then this is something that I basically looked at and didn't really see like an end game, because most industries you're like you look at Amazon, you look at Google, you look at Facebook, you're like there's an end game in terms of how some of these businesses can evolve. But when I look at sort of back then it was still called crypto. I think now we call it digital assets, and now we call it Web3. But regardless, I didn't really see like an end game, sort of how this industry is going to shape out. And for someone like me who has a very adventurous soul, it's just like, oh, this is going to be cool. Like I have no idea how this is going to work out, and that sort of like picked a lot of sort of interest. And one of the most important things is that once you start traveling, you're like, hey, like I can't take my money with me, right? That's sort of I think like one of the biggest pain points, one of the first pain points that I think like carrying your money in your pocket kind of solves for, right? That was one of the original use cases. I think that putting your money by putting things of value on the blockchain and then carrying your own private keys in your pocket, like sort of like that's what sort of the original solution. I think where we are today is the market has become much more sophisticated. So in my career, I joined Binance as their CFO in the summer of 2018, and really sort of to help, as an advisor, as someone who've done deals, as someone who sort of have worked in financial management, have done investing, really helped to sort of build that business. And I left Binance summer of last year because I saw something else emerging, which I think is basically really came afoot, the last 72 hours, the last week, which is basically how does a platform where you basically have a centralized business that's run pretty much like a bank, that's not regulated, right? Because I think how does that work in a world where more and more non-coiners or normies or whatever you call them, basically people that don't want to manage their private keys, right? Because like why do we put our money in a bank? Because it's easy. It's much easier than putting your money in a mattress, right? Which is basically before the emergence of banks in the late 1800s, early 1900s. That's where people put their assets right under their mattresses in the safes in their houses, right? But that's not really safe either. And we've seen that sort of in crypto as well, right? We've seen ton of hacks, ton of spoofings, ton of spams, where you get a random link from a friend, you click it, and all of a sudden your entire wallet's like exposed, right? Those kind of things exist. Right, and those kind of exist in a way that people aren't really there yet in terms of know how to manage their assets in their own personal wallets. That's a massive education process, but I think that massive education process is just getting started. But sort of like on the other side of the world is, wait a minute, well, there's this platform, right? Centralized exchanges where I can actually keep my asset, right? It's pretty easy to use. I can get onboarded pretty easily, right? But the problem is that a lot of these exchanges don't really have a regulator that you go to, right? Like for example, so sort of for me, I sort of see this emergence in this trend where like the world is actually moving sort of more bipolar. In one end, you're basically the emergence of basically regulation, right? On the other end, the emergence of deregulation. Sort of this middle ground is actually where all like the gray area is basically where chaos is occurring, where frauds are kind of rampant, and you get a couple of bad actors and things go crazy, right? So I think, but I do think that sort of that's sort of where it takes me to sort of become the CEO of Coins, is that I had known about the business from basically looking at fiat exchanges, looking at regulated and unregulated, looking at regulated businesses around the world during my time. So sort of I saw something in Coins and I saw something in the Philippines that I think, whoa. I saw something in the Philippines that, you know, made me sort of like be really interested in sort of how do we explore building a regulated business, I think the right way, in a country where I think, if I can go back to the slide, in a country where both the demographic, if I just, I have the slide clicker, sorry. Where, that's me, where sort of like, there's a couple of things there that, where there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of interesting trends that's emerging here in the Philippines. And I'll go through it in terms of the way, whereas like, because I'm pitching sort of like, you know, I feel like I'm pitching not just the Philippines to sort of everyone, but actually pitching Coins.ph and then pitching sort of the opportunity of blockchain, right? So sort of the biggest thing is that like, this is called a demographics bell curve. I think this is probably the healthiest demographic trend you'll ever see anywhere in the world right now. The top is basically where all old people, and the bottom is young people, right? If you look at China, the bell curve is actually like, bottom is actually howling out. Look at Japan, Korea, Singapore, most of the developing countries. Like US less so because it's an immigration open country. In countries where they don't have open immigration policies and it's basically becoming more urbanized, people aren't really having kids anymore. What does that mean? They're going to have to look for other ways to basically make things, right? They're going to run out of, the labor force is going to run out, right? Whereas like, both from a demographics perspective, the size of population, the second largest in Southeast Asia, 15, top 15 globally. I mean, if you, and the third thing that I've realized once I've started spending more time here and living here is that we probably have more young people speaking English in the Philippines, same as the US. It's like, if half of our population is under the age of 30, that's 50 million people, right? That's 50 million English speakers right there. You don't have that number anywhere else in the world other than maybe the United States. So I think these are massive advantages for us not to become, I think, not just, I think, followers in sort of like global trends and global technology, but actually sort of like maybe stepping up to taking a leadership position in global trends and global technology. So I think this is the demographics part. And then the other part, I think probably less so now, especially with all of sort of the pioneers that we see in open banking today. At the beginning of 2020, I think some data showed that half of the population, adult population, is unbanked. But I think that number is much higher because of COVID, because of pioneers like Union Bank and Broncos and Gcash. I think that number is much higher now. If you just look at Gcash's monthly active users, like 30, 40 million people, right? So I think that trend changed dramatically over the last 2 years. And what does that mean? People will, once they have access to banking and open banking, they will want to have more financial assets. And that I think, and they will have more capability to invest in financial assets. And hey, speaking of financial assets, there's this thing called NFTs, digital assets. These are new type of assets, right? This is, in my mind, sort of coming from like a traditional financial world. I see the technology usage of it, right? But I also sort of see like the financial investability of it. I think different people see different angles of crypto and use cases of crypto. But from my perspective, from a traditional world, this is a new asset class. Just like how China internet was an asset class, or real estate is an asset class. I think digital assets is a new asset class. And this new asset, it's just that the way this whole new asset class has a lot of similar trends, but also a lot of different trends. One of the biggest trend is actually custody, right? In traditional financial assets, they're usually custodied with custodians, right? Your money in a bank, that's custodied by a bank, right? Your real estate asset, your title is recorded on a ledger at the government agency, right? Whereas for crypto, it's a combination of two things. One, your ownership is custodied on chain, right? Unless it's, or that's if it's on a decentralized wallet that you have. If it's on a centralized platform, your assets are custodied on a ledger that the company that you sent your money to, your assets to, has, right? So there's that's something that is very, very important to remember. How is my asset custodied if I own a crypto asset, right? And sort of the second big thing that I see is that this asset, this digital asset, has the potential to generate income, right? And has the potential to maybe go up and down in value. So if certain assets behave like stocks in terms of price movement, right? If you invest in an early ICO, I mean, the correlation there is that you're basically investing, you're a seed investor or a Series A investor in a new company or a new technology, right? So there's obviously a ton of risk deal associated with that. If you're investing in a NFT asset or a virtual land or virtual axes, right? These are income generating assets, right? These are no different than basically owning a shop that you can collect rent on if you can utilize it, right? Or the third part is that I think the more emergent, latest thing is actually NFTs, right? Under NFTs, what do you have? You have basically what I call cultural items, right? These are items that you have that have cultural value, right? Like art or wine, right? Or other things, right? So sort of like these are sort of the different use cases, but these are all emergence of a whole new asset class that as individuals you can actually own. But the only difference is that prior assets, financial assets, you have to hold them sort of on a private ledger, and on with custodians, right? Whereas with digital assets, you can actually hold it yourself, right? I think that's the biggest difference here, and that takes the sort of to like, I think for Philippines, I think one of the things like NFT ownership quite punctuated. And this is where I kind of want to comment on what Mark touched upon, which is basically regulation, right? And I think this is going to be the most important topic for crypto over the last 12 months, over the next 2 weeks, 2 years, whatever it is. Like, because this part is the most challenging part, right? Why? Because technology has run so far ahead and adoption has kind of run ahead of basically where our regulators' heads are at, right? I think in this situation, in Philippines, we're actually quite progressive, right? And I'm saying that in the most sincere, generous, and like, because I've talked to, like in my time at working at Binance, I've basically, I was one of the first guys at Binance to actually sit down with the JFSA in Japan to talk about how we want to go compliant there, right? I've talked to regulators, I think, in different jurisdictions. And what I find in the Philippines is there's two things that you want when you when you need to run a business, especially as dynamic as running a cryptocurrency exchange on a wallet, right? Is that you want certainty. Like you need to know what the law says, right? Like, and then you want for certainty because you want to know that the laws that you're applying to run your business with is going to stay the same next year and the year after. And even if it changes, it'll just changes around the corner, right? In a gradual form, right? The second thing you want transparency, right? You want to know exactly sort of what the law is, right? What the regulations are. And I think this is where I think, in the US right now is like, that's where all the blow-ups have happened. Right? Like seriously, if you look at all the blow-ups in crypto over the last 12 months, it has actually happened all in the United States, but with companies that's been run by Americans. Like the blow-ups hasn't really happened in Asia. I mean, we've been victims of these blow-ups, but we haven't really like, and why? Because I think we actually have decent regulation here, like pretty good regulation in that, hey, this is what it takes for you to run a crypto business here in the Philippines. These are the licenses that's required. And we're going to take a look at what's going on. But if there's any drastic changes, we'll let the industry know. And if you want a license, these are the licenses that you have. You go to Mark, right, who's been like I mentioned, he'll tell you, like, these are the way, this is the regulation, this is the guys that you need to know, and these are the rules you need to follow, right? Without these things, you probably shouldn't operate here, right? So I think these are very clear things, right? And then even sort of like I think Philippines came out like for coins. I'll do a little bit plug in here. We're one of the first. Back then, it wasn't called VASPs; they're called VCEs. Coins was one of the first VCEs here in the Philippines, and the application of the VCE was actually more to remittance businesses, given the importance of remittance businesses and the application of crypto in sort of facilitating a lot of the remittance. We're one of the top sort of remittance player in the digital asset industry here. And I think what's really, really interesting is I think from a regulatory perspective is that I'll touch like last point. I got 1 minute here. Is that I think we're going to see probably different types of regulation taking places in different jurisdictions all over the world. And this is almost like you get like, this is like back to like what I call like different, you basically get different petri dishes, right? You get like the China version of how they do what they do with crypto. You get the Korean version, the Japanese version, the Singapore version, the Philippines version, now the American version, which is like, and the European version, Australian version. And then I actually think we can take a leadership position in that here in the Philippines. In terms of like, this is what I hope to do with coins, because I think with the right regulation, with the right mentality, with a talent base of English speakers here in the Philippines that's actually quite digitally savvy, that actually, I actually think we can actually, what I hope to do with coins is actually build a national champion here in the Philippines, and we take our model and we apply our model into other jurisdictions. So, so that's sort of like, it's a long roundabout story of like, why am I here today and what I hope to accomplish and why I think, absolutely love it here, and really hope to, looking to meet and you guys and help you guys to get onboarded to Coins. All right. Thanks, Mark.
A round of applause, please, for Wei Zhou. Thanks, Wei, for that.